Made in 2021, this is a Squier Cabronita Paranormal Telecaster Baritone, which means we're dealing with a low B, an E, an A, a D, a G, and a B string, but no high E. Today, having just purchased this, you can still see I have the hand tag on it from Long & McQuaid. It was not a very expensive guitar, $579.99. I'm going to set the intonation on this, perhaps condition the neck a bit, change the strings. Who knows who's been playing it or what they had on their hands. But along the way, I thought I'd try something a little different. In my day job, I'm an employment lawyer. But in my other endeavors, I write philosophy. So I thought what I would do today is liken the changing of the strings and the intonation on this guitar to a problem that's long-standing, over 1,000 years old in philosophy. And that is the problem of change versus identity. Okay, so before we get to the guitar, let's just talk a little bit about what philosophy is. Philosophy is basically the study of knowledge, the love of knowledge. That's what it means. Philo, love, and Sophie, knowledge. That's a pretty broad category. In fact, all knowledge, including all science and etc., used to be called philosophy. That's why you have a doctor of philosophy, a PhD degree, and it's used in many different things. Geography, psychology, they're all doctors of philosophy. So long ago, and we're talking right near the beginning of Western philosophy, in Greece, there were two philosophers who had opposing, although somewhat complementary views on the problem of change. Now, what do I mean about change? Well, you've probably seen many movies, many TV shows where someone tries to say that, for example, here's a human body, but is it really a human body, or is it just a collection of atoms swirling around in the void that happen to be held together with bonds, but are actually not, that this is not separately existing, that this body is just part of one big continuum of matter, let's just say. And that it all is just matter moving around, swirling, that if you were to look at, for example, any guitar that's in existence today, and you were to leave it out for a bazillion years, eventually all the atoms that make up that guitar would have come apart, and that guitar would be perhaps a pile of ash or dust, or maybe it had blown away. Like the song says by Kansas, dust in the wind, all we are is dust in the wind. You may have heard that. Well, that's the idea that Heraclitus had. Heraclitus existed well before Jesus, hundreds of years before Jesus. And he had this view that effectively nothing, no identity, so what a thing is, can exist, because everything is undergoing constant change, constant flux. So even if you look at the desk that might be in front of you or the TV set that's right in front of you, on a sort of microscopic level, it's sort of dissolving and changing into something else. All right? Of course, he didn't know necessarily about atoms as much as we might know about them today, but the idea was, he came up with this idea, for example, if you step into a river, you cannot step into the same river twice. What does he mean? What if you step into the Thames River? Well, the Thames is the Thames today, it was the Thames yesterday, it'll be the Thames tomorrow, but the atoms of water that are moving through the Thames at any given time are not the ones that'll be moving through at the exact same spot tomorrow. In fact, even if you step into the Thames today, overnight you might lose a hair, you might lose a few cells, something about you will change, maybe only on a microscopic level, or you might even lose a leg, who knows, if you have an accident. And when you step into the Thames tomorrow, you won't be the same either. Everything's undergoing constant change. Therefore, he said, it's impossible for anything to have an identity, to be made up of particular parts, and for those parts to continue on over time. Well, imagine a guitar. I've just shown you this guitar, this Cabronita. What's it made out of? Well, it's got a neck that's joined on with a plate. It's 4 screws to a body. It's got a back plate here that hides some electronics. It's got 6 strings and it's got 6 tuning pegs. It's got paint on it. It has a number of pieces here, the saddles, over which the strings go, and etc. All of these are what you might call parts of the guitar, right? Well, what if we take one string off? Is it still the same guitar? Is it still the Thames River? Or is it something else? Is it the same Thames? Is it the same guitar? Or is it something else? In fact, is it even a guitar? If I chop one string off of this, is it even a guitar anymore? Or is a guitar a thing that has to have 6 strings? So we have one fella, Heraclitus, saying nothing is anything. Nothing has any particular identity. All of it is just swirling atoms in the void. That the idea of something existing as an entity separate from other entities is all an illusion. Well, Heraclitus had another fella who was taking the opposite view. That was Parmenides, around the same time. By the way, both of these folks wrote books called On Nature, and in both cases, the books are largely, there's only fragments left, so there's something toward the idea of change. But in any event, Parmenides said the opposite thing. He said, look, there can't be any change. Because to imagine change, you have to imagine something that not exists anymore becoming something that does exist now, or something that does exist now becoming something that doesn't exist. Well, what is the identity of something that doesn't exist? It doesn't have one. So how can a thing that has no identity become something that does have an identity? So in both cases, Parmenides and Heraclitus, they're saying it's impossible for two things to be true. That things exist as discriminate pieces of matter or things, a guitar, a desk, a lamp. It's impossible for that to be true if things change. Parmenides and Heraclitus agree with that, with one another on that. It's either one or the other. So I want you to think about this in terms of guitars. I'm not going to give you an answer on this. There isn't an answer that's been agreed upon by philosophers. In all of that time, and over a millennia, philosophers do not agree on the answer to the question of change. Now, there was one other philosopher, you've probably heard of him, Aristotle. And he said, and some regard this to be an answer to what Heraclitus and Parmenides were saying, he said that there's a difference between the form of something and the matter of something. So let's look at this guitar. What's it made out of? It's made out of wood, and it's made out of iron and some other metals. It's made out of plastics, which are made out of oils. The paint, again, probably some oil-based product, and etc. That is the matter out of which this guitar is shaped or constructed. But of course, you could take a chunk of wood, bigger than this body, and you could put it into the shape of a Les Paul, or maybe you could carve it into the shape of an Explorer if you had a large enough one, or a Stratocaster. That would be the form of the guitar, not the matter of it. The matter is the wood, the metal, and all that kind of stuff. Well, what Aristotle said to, not to Heraclitus, because he wasn't around at the same time, but in response to Heraclitus and Parmenides, he said, look, you guys are confusing two things. You can't just talk about a thing not existing, then existing. You can't talk about change per se. You have to talk about change in a certain respect at a certain time. Heraclitus talked about this unity of opposites. One entity that is made up of the parts it has, but also not made up of those parts. That's how one might try to explain this idea that we still call this Paul McKeever's baritone guitar, even though it's undergoing constant change, even though it's different tomorrow than it was yesterday or today. So what are we talking about when we say, is it the same guitar? It can't be that the same guitar both does and does not have the parts that it has. That can't be right. That makes no logical sense. So Aristotle says, no, you have to look at the sense in which something is the same or different, and the time at which something is the same or different. So different in what respect? Different at what point in time? So to marry that with what Heraclitus and Parmenides were dealing with, let's consider what Aristotle said. He said, there's the shape of things, and then or the form, and then there's the matter. Okay, so is this the same guitar in respect of the shape? If I change all of the strings, does it have the same form? Yes. Does it have the same matter a day later after I've changed the strings? No. The old strings are gone. This is new matter, but the same form. And this is the way Aristotle tried to reconcile identity on the one hand and change on the other. He said, well, it's the same shape. It's the same, it's still a Telecaster Cabronita. Yeah, it's got different strings on it, but it's effectively the same guitar. Even though time has passed and different strings are on there. But it's not a very convincing explanation, and I'll give you another example of why. There was this example of a ship, the ship of Theseus. And it was a big wooden ship, and it went to battle. And over time, they had to replace various bits. Planks had to be replaced, maybe because they were damaged in battle, or they rotted away. And they were replaced with another plank, until finally, over, let's say, 100 years, every single plank of the boat, every single plank of the ship had been replaced. There was literally none of the matter was the same as the matter that Theseus had been made out of before. So I want you to think about, it's the same form, looks like the same ship, still called the ship of Theseus. It's the same ship that everyone went on to every day and went out to sea on. But by the time, say 100 years had passed, it's literally not made out of any of the same materials at all. Every single piece of it has been replaced over time. Is it, or is it not, the same boat? Now, I'm not going to give you an answer to that, but when testing whether it's a good answer to say, well, it's the same guitar, it's the same shape, the form is the same, it doesn't matter about the matter of the guitar, that the strings are different, or that we've changed the color of the paint, or that we replaced the neck with a different neck, with a rosewood fingerboard to a maple fingerboard. It's still Paul McKeever's Cabronita, Telecaster, Baritone. Is it? And if it isn't, if the ship of Theseus, after all those boards have been replaced, is not really the same ship at all, if it has a different identity because of that change, has Aristotle really solved the problem? Now, if you don't think it's the same ship, well, what if we take a guitar like this and we change only one string? Is it the same guitar? Look in the mirror. Pull a hair out of your head. Throw it in the garbage. Are you the same person that you were before you pulled that hair? Not going to answer, but give it some thought. Now let's get into changing this guitar, or at least replacing it with another one. All right, so we're going to start by loosening off these strings. Ask yourself whether loosening something constitutes a change of that thing. Might not be as silly as you think. Ask your mom whether she's the same woman she was when she was young and her skin was more tight and not so wrinkly because she's gotten older now. Is she the same woman, or is she someone else? All right, so we've got these strings that we're taking off. By the way, these strings on it, because this is a baritone, the size of the strings is unusually large, right? Even though it's like a 6-string guitar, it's still a guitar. It's a baritone guitar. So the B string is a 14 gauge. The G string is an 18. The D, which is in the G position of a regular guitar, it's a wound string, just like a D string would normally be, and it's a 26 gauge. The A is 44. The E is 56. And then the B is 68. Now, the only combination of strings that comes in a package that I know of that has those particular dimensions is this pack of Diodario nickel wound XLs, XL 157. That has the same string gauges that the guitar comes with. So I'm not saying you have to buy those, but if you want the guitar to have the same strings or the same gauges that it came with, that's one way to go. All right. Here we are taking pieces of this guitar off. And you might say to yourself, you're not taking off pieces, McKeever. You're just taking off the strings. Let's have a look. I mean, I take the strings off, and this, by the way, is a feeds through the back. The ferrules are at the back, so the strings come through the back. So you look at this guitar and you say, well, Is it a guitar? Well, of course it's a guitar, McKee. That's the same guitar that you had before you took the strings off. Well, really? Tell me, describe a guitar for me. It has these parts. What do you call a clock that doesn't tell time? What do you call a person who has all the bits needed to play basketball but doesn't play basketball? Is he a basketball player? What do you call a guitar that has no strings? Is it a guitar? Or is it missing an essential part that makes it something else when you lack it? Something to ponder. All right, so first thing we're going to do is condition this neck. It looks pretty clean, so I don't think it was played much when it was in the store. And that's not too surprising. A lot of people wouldn't even have noticed that it existed separately from, or as a different kind of thing than the other 6 strings on the shelf. It wasn't labeled as a baritone except on the little hang tag, which most people won't be able to read from 6 or 10 feet away. I'm just using some lemon oil. This one's called Old English. You want to keep this stuff out of your mouth. It'll close your throat down and you will not be able to breathe and you'll die. So keep it away from your mouth. But it absorbs nicely into the wood, takes a neck that's parched, and it also helps just sort of move some of the loose bits of maybe leftover skin or sweat that people have left behind when they've been playing the guitar in the store. You want to get right up into the place where the fret meets with the wood. That's where most of the garbage is going to accumulate. You want to be careful not to get any oil on the finish. This is, I think, a polyurethane finish. So this oil will probably, over time anyway, eat away at the finish, react to the finish. So you don't want to do that. Try to keep it away from the body if you can. Now that's going to slowly absorb. I'm just going to let that sit for now. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about setup. So I did a setup video for a Stratocaster that I built a little while back. You may recall it if you watched this channel at all. It was a new guitar build. I built a guitar from parts. It was a Stratocaster, a parts caster. And at the end of the project, of course, I did a setup. Well, thing about setups, because it was my first time ever setting up a guitar, is it's easy to make a small mistake that really undermines the whole setup process. And I'll tell you the mistake I made so that you don't repeat it. Partly I wasn't to blame because I'd seen some people who should have known better actually teaching us to do it that way on YouTube. But let's just talk about, first of all, the idea of a setup. So the distance from the nut of a guitar to the 12th fret should be equal to the distance between the 12th fret and the saddles where the strings are going over. So this distance should be the same as this distance. When these guitars come off the assembly line and they get sent out to the stores, they don't get set so accurately normally that the distance is completely the same. And the result is that if you were to play this string open, like an open E, so it's humming from here right through to here, that, if you tune the guitar, so you use a tuner and you Peterson tuner, you could use a Peterson tuner and strobe tuner and get that just perfect. If you were then to come up to the 12th fret and depress the string at the 12th fret, what you want is for the string to be in tune there too. So here on a baritone it'd be a B. So open B here should be on the 12th fret, 1 octave higher, and they should be in tune both in the open position and in the 12th fret position if this saddle is set the correct in the correct position. Now, it might be the case that the saddle's too close to the neck, in which case you're shortening this distance. And if that distance becomes shorter than that distance, well, when you hit the 12th fret string, let's use the B string as an example, this will be sharp because the string's shorter than it should be from the saddle to the 12th fret. So the saddle needs to be pushed this way a little bit so as to make the string a bit longer and so as to make the note go a little bit more flat until it's equal to the note from the 12th fret. From the nut to the saddle in terms of both being Bs, a B here and a B there. So we adjust the saddles this way to set the intonation. The mistake I made in the video, the setup video I did with the Stratocaster, was I wrongly assumed that you can do a note where you hold your finger against the string, just hit the tone without depressing it. I thought I might get more accuracy that way. But actually that's not the case. If you think about it, the string is the harmonic is just going to ring out as it should. So what we need to do is actually depress the string at the 12th fret. Depress it, not just do the harmonic at the 12th fret with a boom, not like that. You want to hold it down gently, and enough that it doesn't buzz, and then check. So at the 12th fret right across, you want to do that so that you can set the correct intonation for each of the 6 saddles. That's one thing. Another thing I discovered was that different professionals were giving different advice about how to set the bow of a neck. So inside this neck is a metal, looks like a violin bow, has 2 pieces, and it's called a truss rod. And when you tighten it, it pushes up and makes the neck want to bow up like this. And when you loosen it, it wants to go back down like this. So one of the professionals that I'd seen, the fellow who, a very knowledgeable fellow who works for Stu Mac, does videos for Stu Mac, his preference was to set the neck so it was, from the way he was describing it, perfectly flat. So if you were to take a ruler, this is a Stu Mac high quality ruler, all right, and lay it across the frets, there would be no space between the ruler and the fret at the midpoint. Right along the neck, all the frets would touch the ruler at the edge. Another video I saw, however, with a fellow working for Gibson, he was doing setting the truss rod, and he had a slight bow in the neck. So it was bowed up at the 2 ends, down in the middle. Why? Well, because when a string is vibrating, it's like a bit like a skipping rope. It's not just staying in a straight line. It's moving in a circle. And when it moves in a circle, it comes away from the fret, closer to the fret, away from the fret, closer to the fret. If the string is set low enough, and you can set the height of the strings down here, as this way. We've talked about setting intonation this way, but these are also adjustable for height. And if the string is low enough, the string, when it's making its movement, when you're hitting the string and it's moving its way around like a skipping rope, it can vibrate and bang off of the frets. So by putting a slight bow in it, in the neck, the string where it moves the most, which is around mid-neck, can avoid hitting the fret as it makes its rotation down. So what's the right way? And I think the reason why 2 different professionals were giving 2 different opinions was because they were talking about 2 different situations. If you're a very lightly picking guitarist, your string might not have much travel. It might not move a lot. It's not being made to be very loud. And perhaps you're a soft picker. Maybe you're doing some very quick picking and you're picking just ever so gently touching the strings. In that case, you can probably set the string height lower, and or you can have the flatter fingerboard. If on the other hand you're strumming, and maybe you're doing great big power strums, those strings are going to be traveling a lot. And if your strings are too low, they might start buzzing off the frets. So your options would be a combination of raising the strings up, or putting a bit of a bow so that at the place on the fingerboard where the string does the most travel, it's not banging off of the frets. So what I'm going to do is, once I'm satisfied that enough of this oil is soaked in, and I think I am for now, actually, it's not drinking up too heartily, so I think it's probably not that bad off. I'll give it one more once over, but I think it's doing all right. I think it's probably not too parched. With respect to change, it's amazing how much philosophy can work itself into art. I'll bet you if you just do a quick Google, or if you even look at your own iPod or iPhone, you'll see a number of songs either with the word change in the title or with the word change being mentioned in the lyrics. I can think of, for example, I'm Going Through Changes by Black Sabbath, on the Black Sabbath 4 album. Tears for Fears had a song just called Change. David Bowie had a song about changing. There's all kinds of songs about change, because change, well, it's an interesting topic, and ultimately is one that gives rise to a lot of philosophical discussion. Sometimes it's not even recognized as philosophy. In other words, people might be having a discussion about this on a bus and saying, well, is it really the same guy if he's changed this? Or is it the same car if you've changed that? You know, think about the song by Johnny Cash. I think it's called One Piece at a Time. And it's about a guy who works at General Motors, and over the years he collects pieces of the Cadillac of each year. So in other words, in 1959 he might get a hubcap, and the next year he might get some headlights, and the next year he might get the rear quarter panel, and the trunk lid comes in another year, and the wheels come from another year, and the brakes, and etc. I mean, that's a pretty unique vehicle once he puts it all together, and that's the funny bit about the song. But is it even a Cadillac? You can see how that'd be an interesting debate, especially among car buffs. So change is an interesting topic, but it has a philosophical root, and it's interesting to go back and look at philosophy, because philosophy will give you the core problems, identify the core problems for you, so that you can then not chase your tail talking about examples so much, and see among the examples the things that draw all the examples together, that they all have in common. All right, so that neck's looking pretty nice now. It's nice and smooth. I've taken off any excess oil. I'm not going to set the bow until I've put the strings on, decided where I want the string height, and because the tension of the strings on the neck will actually change the bow of the neck. Recently, I put a set of heavy strings, similar gauge to this, on an ESP guitar for my son, and the bow that it created in the neck was incredible. It was laughable, really. We had to take the strings off. The guitar was just not capable of handling the stress of the strings. They were just too much. So now, one other thing before we start moving on, I want to talk about baritone versus regular guitar. You might ask yourself, well, is baritone guitar just a guitar with thicker strings? Like, can any guitar just have these, 14 to 68 gauge strings put on and you're good to go? Well, that's one way you could do it, I suppose. You put heavy strings on a regular guitar, you'll probably find that if you can get it not to bow the neck too much, you'll probably find the strings are extremely tight. So you might ask yourself, can I just take any old guitar body and put a baritone neck on it? Now, a baritone neck has a longer scale. So this is a 27-inch scale guitar, not a 24 and change or 25 and change, which is like Les Paul and Stratocaster scales. This is a bit longer, a couple inches longer. And you might say, well, I'll just take a baritone neck and I'll put it on my Stratocaster, and I'll have a Stratocaster that's a baritone Stratocaster, and I can put on those heavy strings. And well, that won't work, and here's why. Because the neck is longer, you've changed the midpoint between the nut and the saddles. Remember, on a longer neck, here's the 12. That 12 is going to be further this way than it would be on a shorter neck. All right? So if you have a regular guitar with the saddles set where the saddles normally would be set on a 6-string guitar, the distance between the saddles and the 12th fret will be too short. It'll be wrong, because the saddles ultimately will be too close to the 12th fret. Remember, you got all this distance now that's increasing the distance between the nut and the saddles. So this distance being longer, this distance needs to be longer too. So on a baritone, this saddle is going to be further back, so that the distance from here to here is the same as the distance from here to the saddles. So you can't just take a baritone neck and plop it on a Stratocaster or Telecaster body. You have to have this change in position as well. All right, let's go ahead with putting the strings back on, new strings. And then we'll proceed to set the string heights. Now, interestingly, these strings do not come in individual envelopes. These are packaged apparently in couples so that you could see the two heaviest, then the two next heaviest, and then the two lightest. I guess that's probably good enough to distinguish them. It can be a bit vexing to try and get it in the hole because it wants to slide out as soon as you push it in. Once you've got it, you can pull it through, and then it won't want to fall out anymore. So we'll just do the same thing with the A. Or actually, this is an E because, again, this is a baritone. So the string that I just put in was at low B. You kind of have to search around for the hole because you can get it in the big ferrule, but that's not the tricky part. The tricky part is finding the exact space where it comes out from the saddles. And then finally, we've got our G and our B, the high B. Hopefully I'll do this without taking my eye out. Don't take your eye out, kid. Not so funny story. I almost did take my eye out with a BB gun when I was a kid. I was over at a buddy's place and got a little too close to the target. Pulled the trigger and the BB bounced off of the board we were shooting at. Caught me right between the eyes. I was a bit more safe with firearms after that, a little bit more respectful. I wasn't hurt, but I was taught. All right, so now we've got all 6 strings through the tailpiece. We'll put them all to the side. Now this is the kind of tuning peg where you put the string down first and then turn and beg. So it's got a hole in the center that sort of mounts the string in. Now I'm not going to do it here because you'll see this string has a thin end. I'm not going to put the thin end in there, but let's see how much length we need. I think I've got a bit too much there. I'm going to say with a string this thick, I'm going to put it right about there. So I've got it in the hole, bend down, and now I can start winding. And I'm winding from the top down because I want the string to bite into the nut. I don't want it overlapping itself. And you'll see this is why there's a string tree here on a Fender style guitar, like Squier is made by Fender. The headstock is parallel to the body. It's parallel to the top of the neck. And the problem with that is when the high strings especially go over the nut, the angle between the nut and here is not as great. It's more shallow than it is here. The angle from here to here is much more dramatic, and that keeps the string in the nut. But when you get up to the lighter strings, that less deep angle can cause the string to jump out of the nut. So Fender or Squier have instituted the practice of putting a string tree, so the strings go under the tree, and that holds them down into the grooves of the nut. Okay, so for the last two, we're going to go under the string tree. All right, strings on. So, back to the philosophical question. Is this the same guitar? Has it changed? Or does that guitar no longer exist? Because this guitar has these strings, and that guitar had other strings. Sounds silly, but with lots of non-silly consequences, both in art and science. And law, for that matter. All right, so we're going to use a Peterson strobe tuner to tune the guitar before we start fiddling with the action and whatnot. I just want a starting position in terms of tuning. Incidentally, because it's a baritone, I wanted to have it tuned so that it'd be akin to the tuning on a 6-string. And that means that the second from highest string, this one here, I don't tune to a G, as one might expect if it's performing like a G string, because it's not performing like a G string, it's now performing like a B string that's been dropped 5 tones lower. That's sounding pretty sweet to me. I'm not complaining about that. I'm not hearing much buzz. Let me just try. Be careful to distinguish between buzz due to not pressing the strings down hard enough and buzz due to the string just being too low. Not hearing any problems with the 7th fret. Interestingly, think about that song, Emmylou Harris. Every night it's the same. Change. I'm gonna leave the height just the way it is, okay? Interestingly though, there's a weird unevenness. I don't know if you can see this. You see the saddle there? It's off kilter, so I'm gonna set it flat so that it's parallel to the body. I don't know why it would be off like that. Makes no sense to me. In fact, what I think we're going to do is I'll pull out my gauges and make sure that the arc of the strings matches the arc of the neck. You know, these necks have an arc. And so you can make the strings share that arc at this end by pulling out a gauge that matches the arc of the neck. So let's do that next. All right, so we've got these gauges here. They run from 7.25 to 20, 20 being the flattest arc. It's like you had a big hula hoop. The bigger the hula hoop, the more gradual the angle here. The smaller that hula hoop, the more tight the angle. So let's put our gauges on the wood underneath the strings and see if we can match up. I could probably look this up on the internet, but rather than do it the easy way, let's just do it the technical way. So we put our gauge on top of the wood and we have a look sideways and we say, okay, so there I can see that 7.25 is too much of an arc. This fingerboard is flatter than a 7.25. So I'm going to move a few gauges up. Let's try a 10. I suspect 10 might put us in the ballpark, but yeah, that's lying flat on top of the fingerboard. So we've got a radius of 10, and we should now be able to put the same device, the same tool, under the strings here and see if the strings touch the metal on top, because the top of this is the same as the bottom in terms of the arc. So let's just slide down to where the strings go over the saddles. And so that I don't scratch the top of the guitar, I'm just going to take that one guide off and put it down under here and just have a look. Now you should be able to tell even if you can't see with your eyes, you know whether the string's touching the guide, you can hear it. Let's have a listen. I can feel it through the tool. I'm touching. But I'm not feeling that. So that means that this string here is higher than the line between these two, or than the arc between these two. Let's see if the next one, that one's not touching either. So now we know that these two strings are higher than the arc of this tool, as compared to these two at least. Let's see. That's touching. That's touching. So these two here arguably have to come down a bit if we like the height of the low B and the high E, which I do. I'm going to leave those the same. So I'm going to use those as our guides on the outside. The 4 strings on the inside I'm going to raise them up higher and then gradually lower them until they all 4 touch the top of this device right here. All right, so let's start with that. We're going to need to use Allen keys to raise them up. I'm going to fix this as well. As I said, it was off kilter. Okay, so let's first get this low B saddle level. All right, that's level. So now we're going to raise these 4 saddles because we like the positions of these two. They're the right height. We want to raise these so that they're too high. We're going to lower the string tension. I think I'll do about 1 turn for each. So if we take our guide, put it underneath, the high B and the low B should touch. I can feel that. I can feel and hear that. So our E string is not touching the top of this thing, so we have to lower it until it does. I'm going to start with a 1/4 turn. It's not doing it. Do another 1/4. Not doing it. Another 1/4. Still high. Still high. Still high. Considerably higher than the E string, or the B string rather. Okay, you can hear that now. It's starting to buzz. I can feel it too, so that's about right. So let's go to the next string, which is on this guitar, the A. You see how much you have to adjust these just to get them into the proper operating condition after they come out of the factory. These are tunings or changes, if you want to call it that need to be made because they just don't have the time or energy, I suppose, to do it at the factory for each guitar. It take a bit of time, as you can tell. Okay, good. So now the saddles are holding the strings on an arc that matches the arc here at the neck. And that means that when we're strumming, we don't have one string up high, another one down low, another one up high, another one down low. They're all on an arc that follows the neck. Now that we've got them on the right arc, we've got the height that I prefer. not getting any buzz when I strum or when I pluck a note. Now we've got to set the intonation to see if each string, when in tune open, is also in tune at the 12th fret. So we're going to go back to our Peterson tuner. Let's start by plucking our low B. That's pretty stable. So let's check our 12th fret now, because that's sharp. It's sharp because the distance between here and here is too short. So this saddle needs to go back this way a bit. All right, so this guitar's saddles can be turned using a standard screw driver. So there's our open. I'll go to the 12th fret now. Still a bit sharp, so I'm going to turn this clockwise, which draws the saddle toward this end that way, which lengthens the string this way and makes it more equal to this distance. So let's try our open B. That's good. 12th fret. Still a bit sharp. So we're going to pull the saddle that way some more by turning clockwise. I think that's about as close as I'm going to get it. If you have a look at the saddle here, it's really, I've had to adjust it quite a bit. Like I've brought it way in. See if I can pull it back further, but you can see the amount of screw that's right there as compared to the amount of screw that's here. This piece, this saddle has been pulled back considerably. I'd say at least 2-3 millimeters. All right, so I've gotten a screwdriver with a larger head. Be careful not to score the body. But it'll give me a better grasp on the screw here. I'm going to give it a full turn. Okay, we've done it. We've done it. Wow. Wow, wow. That's a lot of adjustment. I've had to pull that back, I'd say 3 millimeters. I've had to pull that saddle back about 3 millimeters. And it's about as far back as it can go without a prescription. So, but we've got the product we want, right? We've got the B is in tune now, both of the open B. Might even be a bit flat here, depending how I don't think so. I don't want to mess with that anymore. That's about as close as I'm going to get. Well, I'm going to repeat the process with the E, A, D, G, and B strings. Or if you want to call this the F sharp string. It's an F sharp. That's what it should be tuned to. In any event, I'm going to repeat the process. And hopefully by the time we're done, all of our 6 strings will be in tune both when they're open and at the 12th fret. So I'm going to skip from the camera now, do this off camera, and we'll come back and have a look and see if we were successful. All right, so I've adjusted the saddles this way and that way for each of the 6 strings. And now let's just do a final test to make sure we're satisfied that the intonation's set correctly. So we're a little bit low here. We just tune up our B to a neutral B. And go to the 12th fret, and we're good. The E, and at the 12th fret, good. The A, and at the 12th fret, oh. There we go. That is our D, 12th fret, good. The G, which is down tuned half a step, so it's F sharp, and at the 12th fret, good. And then finally our high B. That's close enough. I'm not going to fiddle with it too much more. I think that's pretty much going to nail it. Lesson to be learned here. All of the saddles on this Cabronita guitar had to be moved that way. In other words, everything at the 12th fret was sharp, and we needed to lengthen the string from here to here by moving the saddles this way. In the case of this B string, quite a bit. Actually, it's almost as far as I could go. The spring's completely compressed, but the rest a more moderate degree. So all that's left is to see whether we're happy with the bow of the neck. Let's just have a look at that. I'm going to use this StewMac ruler, which has a nice flat edge on it. And I'm going to just eyeball it to see what I've got for clearance. Now you won't be able to see it from the angle you're on, but I can tell you that there's just a smidge of clearance there. And that makes perfect sense to me. Like it's a paper or two pieces of paper high. I'm not going to flatten that any because I'm not getting any buzz. I'm liking the action. Nothing feels unduly unlevel or anything like that. We've already made sure that the arc of the strings is right. This guitar, as far as I'm concerned, is ready to play. So let's take off the inaugural plastic from the pickups. All right, so I can hit, you know, a cowboy chord E. Pretty good. And if I go up to the 12th fret, now that I've set the intonation, in tune. So with just a little bit of time, I think it's been about 2 hours of actual time here, been able to replace the strings, condition the neck, you know, put new strings on, adjust the saddle heights using those guides, the arc guides. It's a 10-inch radius, in case you're looking to buy one of those tools for a Cabronita. And once we had the saddles on the correct arc, we were then able to set the intonation so that this is complemented by this, both in tune. All right, did I change this guitar for the better, for the worse? Is this the same guitar it started off to be? I'll leave that up to you. We didn't get deeply into philosophy today, but we did ask ourselves about identity and change. And to summarize, whereas we had Parmenides saying that change is an illusion because a thing is what it is, and it only is what it is, and something that isn't can't become something that is. We had Heraclitus saying, nothing is, everything's constantly changing, everything's in flux. Who was right? Who was wrong? Go change some strings and rock out and think about it. Maybe write a song about it. Take care.